So we're going to continue talking about sustainability, and in this case, we're talking about aquaculture. Pet food is a great market for us, and we have a lot of good friends and do a lot of work with those customers. But aquaculture is growing, and we should have started a pool. I know for 20 years we've been waiting on aquaculture to explode, like integrated poultry has. It's as efficient, if not more efficient, and everybody's just been sitting around waiting, and we haven't seen that explosion that we expected yet. But it has grown substantially. It is a very important emerging market along with biofuels. So again, we talked about the EPA food recovery hierarchy. We want to feed animals, divert food scraps, divert our good protein products that we get as raw materials as renderers into use for animal food, including aquaculture, and render those and look at conversion into fuels and other things. Okay. I showed this yesterday, the UN hierarchy. This is every association saying, how do we link up? These are the goals and targets that the UN FAO is going after, and these should be all of our goals going forward. So every association's done this to some extent. And my friend Lucas actually did this work, and he's looking and he's thinking about how does rendering apply to these different areas. And we come up pretty good with this. We meet 12 of the 17 goals, but one of the very, very important ones specifically to FAO is this life below water, and that's aquaculture. We're overfishing our natural waters. That has to stop. You've all seen fish meal price go up well over $2,000 a ton at times, and it gets ridiculous. The permits are being decreased every year in Peru and other countries. So we're not going to get a lot more fish meal through fishing, natural resources. So aquaculture has to grow, not only to supply rendered fish meals for our use, but also to supply protein for human use. It's very efficient. With global logistics now, we can get it around. I grew up in the middle of the country, and there weren't really any seafood restaurants, or if there were, you walk in and they smell because stuff wasn't fresh. Now you can go all over the place. Des Moines, Iowa's got a really nice seafood restaurant, or at least used to, called Splash. Great place. And that's been several years ago. So with logistics, this stuff's moving around everywhere. Again, I love this comment from one of our members a couple of weeks ago. We make water. We clean water. We collect it. We drive it out of the tissues. It's not in a state at that point to use, so we have to clean and refine it and put it back out. We capture greenhouse gas emissions, and our goal is feeding the future, and part of that involves aquaculture. We have 56 billion pounds of raw materials every year that we pick up just in North America. In Brazil, if we stopped picking up stuff for rendering and all that material went to landfills, they'd have to build almost 1,000 new sanitary landfills to cover that. And that does not work. It doesn't work with the UN goals. It doesn't work with the One Health initiative. If you put rendered materials out in a landfill, they're going to continue to decay. You're going to have a disease vector issues. You're going to have other issues that are going to be problematic. So we can't continue, or we can't divert all that material to a landfill. It's not a sustainable way to handle it. 4 billion gallons of water. We're helping clean up the environment with the watershed that we put out. There's a very large plant just a couple hours from here in Huntsville, Alabama. The water they're putting into the river tributary is cleaner than what is upstream from it. They had I'm going to get this wrong, I think it was 3.7 million gallon clarifier open up. Do you remember, Nathan? I think it was 3.7 million. Tornadoes in 2014 unzipped the side of that clarifier. It all went right into a tributary for the Black Warrior River. Nothing happened. ADEM came out, camped out for 2 or 3 weeks, the environmental department, everything was great. It was so clean, the water, they treated the water so well that it was actually beneficial, and there wasn't an issue. So we clean up a lot of water from the environment, put it back in clean. We reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 70–80% when we compare to petroleum diesel, because we're recapturing, we're repurposing those products. We get a second, sometimes a third use out of them. So that's very important. It's not one use and done. It takes a lot to pull petroleum out of the ground. We're recycling materials that are already here and available, so it's a benefit. We sequester 5 times more greenhouse gas emissions, and we avoid 90% of potential greenhouse gas when compared to composting. Composting is good. I don't want to knock composting. We actually had someone from the Composting Association at our convention, and she thought I was completely against composting. Composting is great for vegetable products. It is not efficient for meat products. And then we also have that exposure, that potential risk for disease vectors and other things. So that's not a good way to handle it. I talked about this yesterday as well. In Brazil, they recycled 1.9 million tons of pure protein, 34 billion tons of fat and meals were produced. 34 billion kcals. We'd have to add 650,000 tons in dicalcium phosphate. That has to be dug out of the earth, put in the soil. Oftentimes with erosion, the phosphorus runs off. You don't get it at the target where you want it. So it's not the best way always to use fertilizer. Meat and bone meal makes a great fertilizer because it releases slowly over time. You get less of the runoff issues that go into streams. I live just a couple hours from the Gulf Coast. I don't know how many of you, but every year we've got red algae blooms, and there's a big issue, and it's hurting the shrimp and the fishing and other things down there. So this is a way, in utilizing render products, a way to keep that material in the soil, or utilizing in feed, we keep from pulling the dicalcium phosphate out of the ground. And we'd have to add 2.1 million hectares and 9,000 tons of fertilizer to grow the corn and soy, just to replace the nutrients that we find in these meat and bone meals. We do not compete with food. And I know you guys have heard that a lot. We've been hearing the opposite a lot, and that's why we're saying this so much. In the US, when we don't have categories, and we have the data and the numbers to back it, we are not competing with specifically pet food. We have a great footprint, and you know, if you want to use soy oil or palm oil in pet food, that's fine. If you're only using it for energy, soybean oil is a great energy source. It's the most consistent. We always used it in research diets because you knew exactly what you were getting with soybean oil. So it's really that they need a palatant, but they want to pay a low price. And that's part of that drive behind food versus fuel. But as you look at our footprint compared to soybean meal, this is because of the land use calculation. That will get corrected by region, I think, going forward. I don't think it's that high in the US. Soy has a good footprint if you remove that land use portion. But the way the models are calculating it right now, we compare very favorably, as well as on the fat side. And what does this mean for us globally? And now I'm going to get into aquaculture production. So those of you that took your cat nap, go ahead and wake up. We all have seen the aquaculture trends. We know it's going up. We know it's increasing. Many of you have aquaculture farmers or companies as your customers. We know that trend's going to continue. Again, we expected more of a uptick and explosion. We've been talking about it for 20 years at these meetings and meetings like World Aquaculture Society. That straight up explosion has not occurred yet, but this is pretty good growth over time. And there's no indication that's going to stop. So if we look at fish meal production, which is the world fish meal production, this red line down here, there's been almost a 20% decrease. And for all this time, we thought, oh, you had to feed fish meal back to fish. It's the only thing that'll work. And we weren't doing a great job with our animal proteins. I'm not smart enough to know how to do that. And fortunately, our next speaker has figured it out, and she'll present a lot of her data because we've got several really good aquaculture nutritionists that have figured out how to replace fish meal with our proteins appropriately, get good production, safe production. But We've got a 500% increase in aquaculture production, and so our products are what they're going to need to feed those fish as they grow. Fish meal versus meat and bone meal price. Meat and bone meal price has stayed just above. We've got it up over $400 a ton, but it dipped back down a few years ago to 200. Fish meal price has skyrocketed. This is 1,800. I did hear quotes over $2,000 a ton at one point in there. So fish meal is not going to get any cheaper. It's come down a little bit from 2010, but it's not going to get anywhere near. So we have an economic advantage. We have a sustainability advantage with the carbon intensity scores that we have. And so aquaculture is a very favorable market for us. And then that's what's driving a lot of our exports. We've got a 200% growth in protein meals. And if we look at where they're going, a lot of it's Asia, Ecuador. Ecuador has bloomed in shrimp production and really grown really quickly. So Central America, Southeast Asia, that's where a lot of these exports are going, and aquaculture is driving quite a bit of that, especially as we're learning better how to utilize that. I know you saw the slide yesterday, but I can't reiterate this enough. We have to stop listening to myths. Food versus fuel is a myth. The livestock's long shadow report was full of myths. It hurt the entire livestock industry. When we were over there meeting, Lucas has made good inroads with the folks at FAO in the livestock pillar and with the LEAP portion of FAO. And we were over there meeting, and there were discussions about how it was really devastating the entire FAO. The funding that they received, the support from industry and researchers, they almost killed that entire agency by going against livestock. And they did that year after year after year. Livestock's one of their pillars. Aquaculture has its own pillar within FAO. It is that big and that important. The use of that very efficient protein to feed humans is so important, they've got their own pillar. So we have to combat these myths. Beef is not beef. Tallow is not, taking forests down to raise cattle. And we talked about the repercussions yesterday in the Netherlands, now Germany, now France. I don't know what would happen in DC if a bunch of farmers took some honey wagons and started dumping them around the Capitol, but that's going on in Paris right now. We have got to stop these things from happening, and we've got to stop bad decisions based on poor science like that report in Livestock's Long Shadow. That's since been retracted. They've got a great individual over the livestock pillar within FAO. He's working really hard. He's got some guys that maybe aren't so friendly in the other pillars, but they're trying. And this was the first step. We were fortunate to receive an invitation, and Lucas and Dana got to attend the Sustainable Livestock Transformation Conference. FAO has been around a long time. This is the first time they ever addressed sustainability in livestock. Everyone else talked about it, aquaculture, the crops division, forestry, they all had, big sustainability pushes. The new leader of the livestock pillar had to fight just to get this put on, but he was successful, and it was very informative, I think, and we can start changing minds by having these conversations. Again, food versus fuel, that is a little bit of an issue in the EU because the categories, they're automatically limited on the total volume that can go to human or animal food. And they really don't want that going to biodiesel when they have the other two categories, which are larger volumes that can be utilized for biodiesel. We don't have that discrepancy here with the categorization. So we take our highest quality fats and we put those in human food use. We put those in animal food use, including pet food. And our other fats, we go to biodiesel, and especially used cooking oil that we go and pick up. That's a great way. We get a first use as a human food grade product, and then we get a second use by turning it into a renewable fuel source. So again, we compare very well against palm, which is a favorite of those guys, but we are trying to really build on our bio-circular economy story. Some of the data on the amount of fuel left, are the carbon scores. This is all from California, the CARB board. You can find all of this information online. but we score the highest when compared to soy and canola. Tallow, used cooking oil does great. It's got the best scores, but we can even ship that all the way to Asia, get it refined there, and bring it back and keep these low scores. That's how good that carbon intensity score for our products are. Consumption of poultry fat by bio-based diesel is only 8%. Kent showed some updated data yesterday, which was down to 7%. We have about 28% tallow in Kent's data that's a little more recent. That went up a little bit, not quite 10%, I don't think. White grease dropped just a few points. So they were trading some of the tallow for the white grease in some of this. But this all goes into our story about biocircular economy and sustainability. And that's the story we have to sell. We are one of the prime institutions to help our customers achieve all these goals that they're going out and setting publicly on carbon reduction. Now, I don't personally believe net zero is possible to achieve. I think that's a pretty steep target. But 20% reduction, 30% reductions. We can help our customers achieve those, both in pet food, aquaculture, biofuels, across the board, and every one of them is being asked to meet these goals. So again, some of you know Teddy Roosevelt's my favorite president, and this is a quote from him. We like to complain a lot. We like to fight with our customers and then play nice and fight about price and what we're going to do. But we spend a lot of time whining, and that's of use to nobody if we aren't working on solutions. So we have to work on a lot of solutions. I know a lot of the crowd in the room is the same. I think we have new people online. So if you're not a part of Pet Food Alliance, I'd encourage you to become a part of them. We are sitting at the table with protein conversion companies, pet food companies, and rendering companies. And all of these issues that we have in contract negotiations from a quality testing point or something like that, we're actually conducting research to come up with answers and get agreement on. Oxidation testing, salmonella testing, hygiene of transportation. All of those things are being discussed here, and there is a sustainability group within this. And then we continue to do research in Fats and Proteins Research Council, our foundation. We got a question yesterday about what do we do if, something happens and we get an animal feed ban on our meals here. We've done a lot of research over the years for alternate uses. We can plasticize our meals. Feather meal works really well at that because of the sulfur bonds. And we've worked on plastics at Clemson. We have some new data using our brown grease, some of our lowest quality product, that they're making cement out of that. And that cement is holding up against Portland cement and any other cement that's currently on the market. Very good product, very stout. He's going through all the engineering testing now, and it's performing very well. So we want to talk about some new data. What are we doing? We have to continue to go forward in this area. We have to produce new data. I still stress how much we were the first in 2010 with the Gooding study, which was published in 2012. We were on the forefront of sustainability, and then we kind of took a seat for a minute, and that was probably a mistake. So now we realize that we're running really fast to catch up. We've got a lot of different initiatives going on. Some of this is we've got several papers of LCA modeling and greenhouse gas modeling from Decision Innovation Solutions. We've done some co-papers with them in the pet food industry as well, looking at where ingredients are coming from and what the sustainability value of those are. And then we've got another project we're working on to do a lot of LCA analysis of our facilities in North America as well. So we're trying to do some of that work. This is some brand new data I just received in December, and we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions based on selected amino acids. So we formulate diets, whether it's for aquaculture, poultry, swine, even cattle to some extent, based on their amino acid needs. That's how we reduce excess feeding of nutrients and really reduce cost and improve the feed efficiency. So in this case, we're talking about lysine, which at least in poultry and swine is the first limiting. In fish, it would probably depend. There's over several thousand species of aquaculture raised. So they're all quite different. we have carnivores, we have omnivores, and they're quite different in the aquaculture realm. But if we look at our products in comparison to grains and some other things, we rank really well on greenhouse gas emission. Blood meal's a little high. I think that's a bad number. These numbers come from the GFLI database. I think we'll see that blood meal number go down. I think it's from some older data and was calculated in a different way. But when we look at soybean meal, again, that land use really hits them hard. And so we're definitely at this moment an improvement for your sustainability score over soybean meal. Methionine would be the second limiting in the most monogastric animals. Fish meal's right here. It's pretty high. But then when you look at our rendered products across the board, they're pretty good. Other sources of protein that, you know, we're not calling them byproducts, but we talk about distillers grains and corn gluten feed and meal. Those are also secondary, very useful feed ingredients that come from a process that was initially done to produce something else. And we score very well against those as well, or even. Threonine's very similar, same type of graph. And then tryptophan, and those were the first four limiting that we look at in most poultry and swine diets. So we're scoring very well on amino acids. All the rest, we have all 20 essential amino acids done. They all follow a very similar trend. So it's very good data and very positive for us when it comes to aquaculture. And I should have said this at the beginning. All of these diets were formulated. Our next speaker actually sent us several of them. They're commercial aquaculture diets that this data was derived from. So you take the diet and formulate it with different ingredients to match the nutrient needs required, and then you calculate what emissions would come out of that using database numbers. So when we show that we're very comparable or better, it's on a true aquaculture diet. It's not just a game and coming up with numbers. It's actually how you formulate the feed and how we score. We talked about GFLI a little bit yesterday, and they use those database numbers, and you come up with that carbon score, that LCA score, when you formulate diets like that. And that's how we're generating, or DIS is generating these numbers. So we've got aquaculture, and this is overall aquaculture. We did some different species that I'll get into. But if we look at animal proteins, they're all very, very low on greenhouse gas emission intensity. But then we have some grains and some plant proteins that rank up here pretty high. So we're, in some cases, people that are trying to achieve those sustainability goals, they're looking for replacement ingredients. We need to be telling them, hey, we have some right here that are really good for you to use. We did tilapia, salmon, and shrimp. We had a baseline scenario where they'd be today if we did the current diet, and then if we looked at greenhouse gas emissions and our reduction in the overall diet, how we could achieve that. And so these were similar to the reductions we saw on greenhouse gas emissions. I know this is a lot of data. I don't expect you to really read these numbers. What really got me interested about this is the percent change in every one of these when we started using animal proteins has a minus in front of it. Every single one of them was an improvement. Some of them are small, they're 1 or 2, but some of them are as much as 40, 50% for these specific amino acids. So we are getting good value and supplying very useful essential amino acids to these fish and shrimp. This is for, again, total aquaculture, looking at the baseline for each amino acid versus the scenario. So the comparison shows you we can drop it in every case. We start to insert animal proteins. This is the use, how much is used in commercial diets, commercially fed in aquaculture. And we look at grains, plant proteins, animal proteins, fats and oils. So here's where the switch came in. We reduced grains, we reduced plant proteins, and we increased animal proteins. Fats and oils stayed similar, other ingredients stayed similar. But that's how we're getting that deviation, is we're forcing rendered products in here, and we're achieving those sustainability and reducing those greenhouse gas scores. So this is really great data showing that. Comparison of meat and bone meal, poultry byproduct meal, it's the main protein source in the different scenarios. We increase poultry byproduct meal in these scenarios, a little bit more fish meal, and this would be rendered fish meal. Soybean meal was dropped. Other plant proteins were dropped. Meat and bone meal was increased a little bit as well. And then here's where the greenhouse gas emissions from all those ingredients go in. And gelatin's very high. Fish here, this is whole fish that's being fed, a whole fish type meal. This will be a rendered meal down here. So rendered meal, blood meals, poultry by meat and bone meal, things like that. We're all ranking very, very well in these diets based on greenhouse gas emission, even though we're increasing what's going in them. Similar scenario here for tilapia. The animal proteins are all down at the bottom, very low on greenhouse gas overall emission, where we have some grains and soybean meal is out here. So we are ranking very well in comparison to plant products. Similar data for salmon, and salmon would be, the next speaker may get on to me, but I look at salmon as more of a carnivore. Tilapia would be more an omnivore type fish. So they do eat different things and have different wants and needs. So the plant proteins may not be as good in some cases for some of these more aggressive carnivorous type fish. And this is in shrimp. And again, we're ranking very well. We're holding our own down here. So overall in shrimp diets, we're performing well. So we are a good source of essential amino acids for different aquaculture diets. We can help them reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Every time, every scenario they've run, no matter the species, we're down low. We have a very low emission of greenhouse gas through the utilization of our products, and we can help them achieve their goals. This is where I was talking about it. This graph is useful because it really brings it out. I don't want to knock soybean meal. It's a great protein source. I've used it for years. We did all veggie diets and research. I could grow birds fine on that. If I'm making a commercial diet, I prefer to use about some animal protein up to a limit, usually to meet my calcium and phosphorus, and then I'd supplement with a plant protein. But you can see how hard soybean meal is getting knocked because of the land use. It's quite substantial. All of our animal proteins are down here in the corner. So that does make a difference when you look at these graphs. And I know they're working on that for different regions. Soybean meal here in the U.S. probably shouldn't be counted the same or have the same negative effect as Brazil. But for right now, when you have companies coming to you saying, you have to help us achieve these goals, we're the best source at the moment. And this is all based off the scientific models that are available and used worldwide. So again, plant-based meals, and I put the plant-based meals up here. The real point is they're all 1,000, 2,000 for the amino acid supply. Look at the animal proteins, greenhouse gas emission. The max we go is just over 400, and that's just for Lucy. So when we go back, we're up to 1,000 to 2,000 for plant proteins. And this just shows how much improvement you can give your customer by supplementing these animal proteins. And Dr. Viana is going to show us how to do that in just a moment. So things are changing. Models are going to change. I'm a little bit of a pragmatist. We've got a brand new industry developing around sustainability. If you think these people that are entering that industry are wanting to switch jobs anytime soon, you better think again. They're going to continue to change models so they can continue to come consult for you guys and your customers and continue being employed and paid. So the models are going to continuously change. We need to be ready for that. The Gooding model was great. It was what was being used at the time by the scientific community, but it has changed. And so we're updating that as well in some of our work. Social sustainability is coming up. And I dread it, but there's more and more people talking about scope 3 emissions, which is going to be a real challenge. But part of the work we're doing, part of the stop whining and complaining and do something effort is going to get these database numbers for life cycle analysis into the GFLI database. Our European colleagues, again, were ahead of us. They had a timeline. All the laws surrounding this in the EU are going into place this year. They had to get out in front of it before they got themselves in trouble. But it's an independent nutrition and food industry institute. And then part of sustainability is how do you retain your employees? Those are questions we're getting asked now. I remember the first sustainability audit I ever got involved in, we were asked if we locked up workers in the evening or chained them while they were working. And we were shocked, but apparently somewhere in the world that was happening, or that question wouldn't have been on the audit. That was actually from a biofuels company, and they were out in the forefront of that. But we have to work on keeping and retaining our good employees and harvesting the next batch that's going to replace them. And so I'm going to continue to put this in every slide. I gave Darlene a shout out yesterday. There's a great college student program. There's 500 or 600 students here that are looking for internships and jobs. If you aren't interviewing, call Barbara Jenkins, go to US Poultry and Egg website and look up the college student program. This is where you need to come. Darlene did it for the first time ever last year, and I gave him a shout out. I know Tyson, Pilgrims, the poultry production companies have done it for years, as some feed companies as well are down there. But it's a great opportunity to recruit and replace. And then we have to work on mechanical schools, trade schools. We need a lot of wrench turners in our operations. We're a little different than a protein conversion plant. And I've known people that have worked in both, and they say protein conversion is a people job. It's a social job. You're managing tons of people. When you go to rendering, it's about managing that equipment. You've got huge pieces of machinery. You got to keep them running. You can't shut down because there's, in my case, at my previous employer, there was 15 processing plants waiting on you if you shut down. So that's too many. They have to run, you have to run. So we need wrench turners as well. And then one final invite, Dr. Viana and some other speakers are going to be joining us. We're going to put on a symposium as part of the Aquaculture America meeting that's at the end of February in San Antonio. I'd like to invite you all to attend. It's a great place. I know PPFC has a booth, and they've done a lot of work there over the years and really seem to enjoy it, and I think picked up some customers there. So it's a great place to network, get to know the aquaculture industry better, maybe come up with some contacts for export and customers in aquaculture, but learn more about that business so you can help grow your business. And while you're there, I expect every one of you to sell them on your sustainability story, because ours is pretty hard to beat right now. So feel free to contact me. We're going to have a panel at the end. We've got a couple more speakers on this topic of aquaculture, but I appreciate everybody's attention, and we'll go to the next presentation.